The objective of the day was to sort of deconstruct the issue of low carbon economy in efficiency, in low carbon energy sources, in storage, transversal issues. And what I'd like to invite our panel now is to sort of reflect on what they heard during the day and try to recompose a picture and the proposal as to go forward. We'll take Steve Lennon first, who here leads the ICC delegation, but is as well vice president at ESCOM, the largest electricity generation company in Africa. And then we take Mr. Muhammad Hidayat, who represents who is the president of the Indonesian Chamber of Commerce. And then Bjorn or Ivo, whoever comes first. Steve, how do you get now that picture back and some clear proposals on what we could move forward?
Well, you know, Claude, it's interesting. We heard Ivo de Boer this morning saying that definitely business is part of the solution. And today, and I know that you didn't design the program that way, but it actually came out that way, that you can see that there's so many examples of where business is definitely doing things and making a difference and creating the solid foundation for a low carbon economy. And I think that we also heard the IEA just telling us how enormous the challenge is when we come to the energy sector anyway. And what became increasingly obvious as we went through the day, that today is not so much about business saying, this is the policy environment that we want to be able to thrive and to create a low carbon future for the global economy. But it's more about saying this is what business and governments can do together. And I think that is really the direction that we started in 2002 in the World Summit in Johannesburg. And I think that if you just look at some of those key elements of what business has been saying, it's saying the same thing as governments are saying. We want an inclusive framework. We want an environment where all of us can pull together. Whether we're talking about businesses, whether we're talking about sectors, whether we're talking about nations. Now, some will be pulling above their weight and some will be pulling it below their weight. But at the end of the day, we want to make sure that the mechanisms we put in place and the policies that we put in place enable us all to work towards that common goal. We know that we need to be doing things right now that will mitigate climate change. There's many things that we can do. We've heard about it this morning, that there's win-win solutions, there's energy efficiency, and we must ask ourselves, when I say we must ask ourselves as business, why are we not doing that? We must not stand behind excuses of there is not an enabling policy environment or there are non-economic drivers and hurdles, etc. We must just say, let's actually rather find ways of doing this because we have to do it. We've spoken also about carbon markets. And yes, there's a lot of debate around carbon markets and whether these markets should indeed be global. And I think at the end of the day, once again, it's a matter of saying, let's make carbon markets work. Let's make them more effective and less bureaucratic, because they're a bit of a nightmare at the moment. And whatever we have in place, let's make sure that all of these different mechanisms talk to each other. We've also spoken about adapting. We need to be able to model the impacts of climate change. We need to be able to predict the impacts of climate change. But as business and as governments, we need to factor adaptation to the negative impacts of climate change into our plans. Whether they are national strategies or business plans, we have to factor adaptation into our plans. We've also heard about innovation, research and development, the deployment of existing technologies, flagship projects on things like carbon capture and storage, etc. And I think that, once again, innovation, research, development, demonstration, this is not only the purvey of governments. Business has a major role to play. We all invest in research and development. We need to partner with government in leveraging those research funds that we all spend and that governments spend in such a way that we can accelerate the learning curves. And I think the true challenge is not to say that these low-emitting technologies are more expensive, therefore they're difficult to deploy. The key challenge is to say, let's make that low carbon future the lowest cost future. And I know there are many that will say it's pie in the sky, it's daydreaming, etc. But there are technological options out there that are in the process of being developed that could well be playing that role. And then the final point that has not really been emphasized today, and Claude, you touched on it in your opening remarks. We've spoken previously about partnerships. And I think that that is something that we need to build on. And I don't think that we've really been successful in taking up the concepts of partnerships as much as we could have after the World Summit in Johannesburg. I think that there are successful partnerships that have been established. We need to learn from those. We need to replicate those and make sure that we're creating value-based partnerships that are really going to take us forward into the future. There's a final point that I want to make, and that is that there's a relationship between business and our customers that has not really been much of a subject to too much discussion today. Yet it is absolutely essential that we have a look at consumer behavior and the role that business plays in informing consumer behavior, the way in which consumers use our products. Energy efficiency is a case in point. As power companies, we go out there and we say, use less electricity. But there's not too many businesses that go out there and say, use less of our product. We go out there and we say, buy more of our product. And I think this is a dynamic that as business we need to look at and say, well, how do we actually manage that dynamic if we want to truly create a sustainable future? Thank you.
Thank you, Steve. Just one question, maybe, because you are very bold and you say, you know, let's go and do things. Yet when we listened at Nobuo Tanaka's, or when we looked at the statistics, we said, despite of all that gang-ho language we often hear, the truth is that R&D spending on energy, alternative energy, is on the average going down, that efficiency is slowing down. Is it an effect of statistics? And there are some companies, you know, in this room and like you who are actually doing just the reverse, or? And how can you reverse the whole trend?
R&D spending has been going down. I would say that it has been leveling out and maybe has been increasing slightly, but it definitely is not getting back to the levels that it should be. I think if I have a look at major research programs that are happening in my company, if I have a look at some of the big programs that are happening around the world, we're getting back into the era of big flagship projects, which is something that I think we last saw probably in the 70s. We're seeing flagship projects for clean coal technology, carbon capture and storage. I think we'll be seeing flagship projects on nuclear. So I do think that there is hope on the horizon. There's a lot that's happening in the research environment, but we do need to increase those funds. But when we look at the capital demands of those big research projects, those research funds are going to virtually increase anyway.
Thank you. Mr. Hidayat.